After 8 years in a Rams jersey, Cooper Kupp is finally gone from the franchise, but luckily they drafted his replacement a couple years ago in Puka Nacua. Now, as Kupp has moved on to the Seattle Seahawks, Nacua is going to take over that wide receiver one role, but he's not completely left hung out to dry. They brought in Devontae Adams, one of the best route runners in NFL history, to be the wide receiver too and take some of the load off of Nakua's shoulders. I still think Nakua is going to be an excellent wide receiver this season, and especially with Matthew Stafford throwing him the football, he should be able to put up some very solid numbers along with the rest of this Rams offense. Their first game is going to be at home as well. They're facing the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud in year three. Now, I think the Texans are going to be a very solid team this year. They have a nasty wide receiver core consisting of Nico Collins, Tank Dell when he's healthy, so probably not this season. Two Iowa State wide receivers, which they just drafted, the better of the two being Jaden Higgins. The running back room is also pretty incredible with Joe Mixon and a washed up, potentially, Nick Chubb. And the defense going to be very, very good as well. The biggest concern is the offensive line and whether or not they can protect CJ Stroud long enough for him to get the ball to those playmakers. I think that it's going to be tough in this first game, but I trust the Texans a little bit more than I do the Rams. Both are very good teams, very likely to make the playoffs. I just think that Houston's going to get the win in week one, and the Rams are going to make it close for sure. It's a great week one matchup, but I like Houston to win it.
And the reason it's going to be close is because the defensive front that this Rams team has is really, really good and really young too. You got Jared Verse and Braden Fisk from last year's rookie class who were absolutely outstanding, not to mention already having Kobe Turner and Byron Young for the last few years. It's really going to be their secondary. It's a little bit weaker compared to the rest of the NFL teams, but still pretty solid. But I do think after CJ Stroud's numbers dipped last year after an incredible rookie season, they might start to come up a little bit, and that's going to kick off with a win against the Rams here. The Rams should be in the win column, though, in week two as they are on the road facing the Titans. And Tennessee is just going to be a couple of years out from returning to a competitive place in the NFL. They're in the midst of a rebuild, considering that they just took Cam Ward with the number one overall pick to be their franchise quarterback after Will Levis did not pan out. But it's not going to matter because, like I just mentioned, this Rams defense is going to be so good. And Jonah already talked about this amazing offense that LA has. Matthew Stafford has not missed a beat since coming to the organization from Detroit. Kyron Williams is still a very solid running back, and that wide receiver core is going to be great. So they'll get the win here and move to 1-1. And then they have a really tough road trip to face the reigning Super Bowl champs in the Philadelphia Eagles. And what can be said about this Eagles team that hasn't been said before? You have the best running back and arguably the best player in the NFL in Saquon Barkley. Jalen Hurts continues to get better each and every season, and it helps when you have a receiving core of AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, two arguable wide receiver ones, behind an offensive line that is consistently one of the best in the NFL, and a defense that is constantly being filled by young, talented players from the draft. I really don't know how this Eagles team would get any worse from last year, other than the fact that their schedule is going to be a little bit more difficult. But the Rams are going to make it close here. But I do think the Eagles just have way too many weapons for the Rams to be able to compete with them this early on in the season. So the Rams will drop to 1-2.
Then it's back home to face the Indianapolis Colts in a two-game stretch here that's a little bit easier than they had to start the season. I think the Colts are going to be okay this season. It's not clear who the starting quarterback is going to be yet. Anthony Richardson was when he wasn't hurt last year, but it seems like Daniel Jones has been making some strides through training camp. Still unclear who they're actually going to start, so that is an unknown for the Colts. Definitely something that makes them worse than the Rams because Matthew Stafford will be better than whoever they put out there. The Colts do have a few playmakers on offense. Obviously, you have Jonathan Taylor if he can stay healthy. The wide receiver room is solid, but nobody that's crazy in there. And the defense also just a few solid playmakers. They added to it a little bit this offseason, bringing in Charvarius Ward from San Francisco. I think the Colts are going to be all right, but they're not the best team in their division, and they're definitely not better than the Rams. Give me LA to bounce back with a win and move to 500 before a in-division matchup with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, a lot of people still have the 49ers as the division favorites. We absolutely do not. The wide receiver room has basically fallen apart, and you have Debo Samuel gone to the Washington Commanders. Your top two receivers in Brandon Ayuk and Jawan Jennings want new contracts, and just all around not looking great. Christian McCaffrey is an amazing running back, but he struggles with injuries a lot. Brock Purdy was just re-signed to a long contract. Hopefully he continues to play as well as he has, but with his weapons continuing to be downgraded, you're only asking for him to start playing worse. The defense, like we just mentioned with the Colts, sold away Charvarius Ward, so probably not going to be quite as good on the defensive side of the ball either. I think the Rams are considerably better than San Francisco this year. They're going to get another win here and move to 3-2.
Then they have yet another tough road game, this time facing probably one of the favorites in the AFC in the Baltimore Ravens. And the Ravens still have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in that backfield, probably the most lethal backfield duo in the NFL. But they've added quite a bit onto this defense that was already one of the best in the NFL. They drafted Malachi Starks to join Kyle Hamilton in the safety position. They also added Jair Alexander during the offseason to bolster that secondary along with Marlon Humphrey. And they also drafted Mike Green out of Marshall to add to their defensive line. This defense is going to be really, really good this year. And offensively, if Lamar plays like he did last year when he arguably should have won the MVP, then Baltimore is going to be my personal pick to win the Super Bowl next season. It's going to be a tough ask for the Rams to go from the West Coast to the East Coast to face one of the best teams in the NFL. And I just think they will fall short in this one and go back to 500. Then the following week, they go across the pond to face the Jaguars, and they're home away from home in London. And the Jaguars are going to be a interesting team next season. Trevor Lawrence has had his ups and downs. Recently, it's been a lot more of the downs, as he's not lived up to his expectation in the last couple of years. But granted, he is doing all of this with a really poor wide receiver room, except for last year when they finally drafted one of the best wide receivers out of college in Brian Thomas Jr., who, as of right now, has a solid argument for the best wide receiver from that draft class alongside Malik Neighbors. And now the Jaguars having another franchise guy, getting Travis Hunter, who they're experimenting with possibly playing both sides of the ball, as in training camp he has played wide receiver and cornerback. I do think they probably need a little bit more help in the secondary despite having wide receiver problems over the past few years. I do think Travis Hunter is also a slightly better cornerback than he is a wide receiver. I think his skills will be better utilized there. This Jaguars team has made some improvements, but compared to this Rams team, I don't think they're going to have enough firepower to deal with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. Like Jonah mentioned at the beginning of the video, Devontae Adams, even though he's not the same wide receiver he once was, is one of the best in the NFL. He's still one of the best route runners ever and will provide solid relief for Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua, constantly getting open and allowing Puka Nacua to get downfield for those big shot plays for Stafford in this offense. So this Rams team is going to move to 4-3 with a win in London before going into their bye week.
Next up is a home match with the New Orleans Saints, what we think is probably going to be the worst team in the NFL this year. I really don't see them being able to compete in many games at all this season. Their starting quarterback looks like it's going to be Tyler Shuff, who they drafted in the second round last year. I just can't see him leading a solid NFL offense. He was in college for 7 years for a reason. I cannot see the Saints being good at all. They have a few weapons on offense with Alvin Kamara running back and Chris Olave, who's been dealing with concussions the past couple seasons at wide receiver. So it's not going to be all bad for Tyler Shuff. He has some guys to get the ball to. I just don't think that it's nearly enough to compete with teams that are the likes of the Rams.
And then they have a rematch with the 49ers this time, a road game. And Jonah already hit most of the major points for the 49ers earlier on. And even though they did lose Charvarius Ward, their defense is still going to have some playmakers. They still have Fred Warner, who's one of the best linebackers in the NFL, and Nick Bosa is still one of the best pass rushers in the NFL as well. But the rest of the defense is not going to be nearly strong enough to slow down this Rams offense. And then defensively for the Rams, there's just way too many playmakers against this 49ers team that is honestly gotten a little bit worse offensively. So the 49ers will drop both games to the Rams. The Rams will move to 6-3.
Then it's back-to-back home games, the first of which against the Seattle Seahawks and the rematch of Cooper Kupp with his former team. Now, I do think that Seattle is going to be pretty interesting this year. They did bring in Cooper Kupp, like I mentioned, but they lost both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, so Jackson Smith-Njigba now going to be the wide receiver one. Also got rid of Geno Smith as he's now a Las Vegas Raider. Their starting quarterback going to be Sam Darnold. Now, if Darnold can have a similar season to what he did last year with having Justin Jefferson at wide receiver, then the Seahawks are going to be in very good shape. However, that is very unlikely. That's not to say that Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp aren't good wide receivers because they are some of the best in the NFL. But Justin Jefferson is in a league of his own, and Sam Darnold is not going to be quite as good as he was last season without having him as a safety net to throw the football to. I do still think that Seattle's going to be a very solid team. They're probably going to make it kind of close with the Rams, but we like Los Angeles to win this game. And then it's a Sunday night football matchup with the Buccaneers. Now, the Buccaneers are another team that we think is going to be very, very good this season. Baker Mayfield is always a threat to throw for a lot of passing yards in a season, and he has arguably one of the best full wide receiver cores in the NFL next season with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Emeka Egbuka, their first round draft pick out of Ohio State. The Buccaneers are going to have a very, very good offense. I think the only thing that could hold them back is the defense, which is actually also going to be pretty solid, which is why we think the Buccaneers are going to be a very scary team next year, especially for some of these better teams in the NFL. That being said, I think they're going to play the Rams really, really close, but give me the home team to win in prime time.
That is back-to-back road games for the Rams after going on a bit of a win streak here to coming out of that bye week. And the first road trip is against the Carolina Panthers, who I think are going to surprise some people this year. They've gotten a little bit better and started to hit their stride towards the end of last season with Bryce Young after he was benched for a couple games for Andy Dalton. But now he's looking like that number one overall draft pick that he was. And they went out and got Tedero McMillan in this year's NFL draft to be his new number one target. The rest of this Panthers team, I don't think is going to be as strong as what the Rams are bringing to the table. Yes, the Panthers have a good secondary duo of Michael Jackson and J.C. Horn, and the defensive line is also pretty solid. But I think the Rams have way more weapons compared to what the Panthers have. Even if it is a road trip going from the West Coast to the East Coast, the Rams are just the better team. So they'll move to 9-3 before finally facing their last division opponent going on the road to face the Arizona Cardinals. And I think the Cardinals are going to be a little bit of a threat to the Rams this season for a division title because they've gotten quite a bit better this offseason. Kyler Murray is playing for a new contract with Arizona to continue to be their franchise quarterback. And he started to play a little bit better during last season. And I think this year, with Marvin Harrison Jr. entering year two, the connection that he'll build with him this season is going to be a lot better than what happened last year. Marvin Harrison Jr. will end up being one of the best wide receivers from that draft class, along with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Not to mention the additions that they have made on the defensive side of the ball, drafting Walter Nolan on the defensive line out of Ole Miss, along with both Will Johnson and Denzel Burke to add to the secondary. Will Johnson has already impressed people during the opening training camp days. So I think this Cardinals team is going to be really, really good next season. I don't know if they're quite ready to dethrone the Rams as the division champs, but they will certainly give them a run for their money. We've seen the NFC West come down to the wire the past few seasons. I think this one might be the same case because the Cardinals are going to beat the Rams here, dropping them to 9-4.
And then they go back home to face the Detroit Lions, one of the best teams in the NFL again this season. This is also going to be the rematch of Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford after switching teams a few years back. Always a fun time to see them play against each other. And I think that the Lions are going to have a very solid team once again, a scary defense, and you never know what the offense is going to do with Dan Campbell as the head coach. I think they're going to be very, very solid. Once again, plenty of playmakers with Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams when he's not being suspended for violations. I think the Lions will be a very hard team to beat, but the Rams at home are one of the few who can actually do it. And that's exactly what we're going to pick here. Give me Los Angeles to get a very high scoring win over Detroit.
Then it's a Thursday night game against the Seattle Seahawks. And once again, Jonah kind of touched on most of the points for the Seahawks team. But I do think defensively, Seattle is going to be fairly solid. They have Leonard Williams on the defensive line, Devon Witherspoon in the secondary, some of the better players at their position. And I think with some of the young guys they have coming in, like Nick Emenawari, this defense can be pretty solid. The biggest concern for Seattle was their offensive line, and they made sure to address some of it, taking the number one overall offensive guard in the NFL draft this year. And while that's not an immediate fix, I think towards the end of the season, we will start to see Seattle's offensive line start to play a little bit better, even against a defensive line as good as the Rams. It's very hard to beat the same team twice, especially in such a competitive division like the NFC West, and especially against the Seahawks team at home in one of the toughest stadiums to play in the NFL. It's a primetime game. It's going to be an electric one, but the Seahawks are actually going to get the job done here and avenge their earlier loss to the Rams to drop them to 10-5. And then they go on the road Monday night this time, a really long break in between games. They're going to take on the Atlanta Falcons, who are going to have one of the most explosive offenses next season. It'll be Michael Penix Jr.'s first full year as the starter after being drafted kind of controversially or unexpectedly by the Falcons last year. But I do think he showed a lot of potential in the couple starts he had last year in place of Kirk Cousins. And with the weapons he has, that being Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, he's bound to have a phenomenal season. The questions are going to be more on the defensive side of the ball. The defensive line is a little bit weaker compared to the rest of the NFL. The secondary is going to be pretty solid with Justin Simmons still in the skies, but it's still going to be a little bit of concern for this Falcons team. But at this point in the season, I think the secondary will have it all figured out and will be able to play a competitive game against this Rams team at home. And having that long of a break is either going to be a really good thing to keep guys fresh for this game and absolutely curb stomp the Falcons, or it's going to be a disadvantage for the Rams, who are just going to be so anxious to play 11 days after their loss to the Seahawks and are going to fall short. And that's actually what we have happening. The Falcons pulling off the upset at home against the Rams here, dropping them to 10-6 with only one game left in the season.
And that game is game number two against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Connor hit on most of the points for Arizona early this season, and I think this is going to be a pretty important game. We don't know what the Cardinals' record is going to be quite yet because we have not predicted them, but there's a chance it could be right up here with Los Angeles. Maybe this game could be deciding the division. The Cardinals got the best of the Rams the first time. And I really don't see either team sweeping this series. I don't think the Rams have a better chance of winning both games, but the Cardinals definitely not going to go 2-0 against Los Angeles. So this one's kind of a no-brainer. Rams are going to get the win and finish the season at 11-6. Last season, the Rams did go 10-7, so we have them improving by one game, but I think the floor could be as low as 8-9. There's a couple other games on here that could very easily go the other way for Los Angeles. A couple of those ones that we had them winning. For example, the one against the Buccaneers. I really do like this Buccaneers team. Same thing with the Lions. Both of those go the other way, and the Rams are pretty close to a 500 team. The ceiling, though, 14-3. I think that there's a few games on here that really easily could be wins for the Rams. You look at that first Cardinals game on the road, that's a definite possibility. Other ones will be pretty tough, like road trips to the Eagles or the Ravens. But if they have an absolutely incredible season, some of those definitely could go the other way, and we could see a 14-3 Rams team. The Vegas over-under, though, at 10.5, just slightly favoring the under. So we are a little bit higher on the Rams than the odds makers, but that's all right because I do think that there is a very good chance we see an 11-6 Rams team this season. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.